KPBS On Demand is supported by Splatero, helping homeowners pay for home improvements by offering streamlined access to your home's equity with no additional monthly payments or new debt. Splatero provides a lump sum payment in exchange for a share of your home's future value. Pre-qualification available at splatero.com.
Welcome to another edition of listener-supported KPBS Cinema Junkie podcast. I'm Beth Accomando. Today, we're gonna kick some ass.
Cars, guns, knives, just basic stuff. You gotta know how to make an omelet, right?
Three years ago, John Wick served up a simple premise. Hitman comes out of retirement to avenge the death of his puppy. It rose above all the other action films because it was brought to the screen by a pair of veteran stuntmen, Chad Stahelski and David Leitch of 8711. Not only did they know how to showcase their stunt team and star Keanu Reeves, but they also knew how to tell a high-octane revenge story. John Wick Chapter 2 picks up a few days after the first film, as John adopts a new dog, recovers a stolen car, and attempts to return to retirement.
You're not very good at retiring.
I'm working on it.
But no matter how hard he tries, the bodies just keep piling up.
So I guess you have a choice. You want a war? Or do you want to just give me a gun?
Somebody please get this man a gun.
I'll speak with Stahelski and with Common, who plays one of Wick's adversaries, and with Bay Logan, author of the seminal book, Hong Kong Action. Stahelski credits actor Keanu Reeves, with whom he worked on The Matrix, for providing him in 8711 with the opportunity to do an action film right. And that happened because Reeves had confidence that Stahelski was ready to move from stuntman to director. Reeves talked about working with Stahelski at a press junket for the film.
Chad brings such a experience to physical production in terms of shooting action. He was a stuntman at a very high level, so he understands the cinema of action and what it takes to put that on screen.
Part of what it takes is actors like Reeves and Common, who are willing to train extensively before shooting even begins. That allows Stahelski to shoot longer takes from wider vantage points so that the audience can appreciate that it's really the actors on screen engaged in the action.
You have to do longer takes, the expectation's longer takes, and that's demanding. It's really demanding as fighting goes, movie fighting goes. Longer takes is, again, it adds to complexity, footwork, cooperation. So it's been cool to be able to have time to train with Common and with Ruby to try and, get the dance.
And that's precisely what it is, an action dance. And Stahelski choreographs it with intensity, innovation, and cleverness to create what he calls gun fu, a mix of martial arts and tactical three-gun, and whatever else you might find lying around on the set. As an action junkie addicted to Hong Kong and Asian cinema, I appreciate what Stahelski is doing. When I began my interview with him at the London Hotel in West Hollywood, I tried to convey to him how excited I was by the opening stunt sequence. First of all, it began with a nod to the stunt work of the silent clowns of Hollywood cinema, as a scene of chaotic black and white slapstick comedy is projected on a New York building just before John Wick comes speeding into the frame. As wide shot after wide shot held on the action, I slipped closer and closer to the edge of my seat because it was so refreshing to see action not done with handheld shaky cam and a succession of rapid cuts that don't allow you to see anything or appreciate the skill of the stunt work. I began by asking Stahelski about how he approached that opening action sequence.
Well, I think, my background comes from action directing and what they call second unit directing in Hollywood. Our company, 8711, deals with something called action design. There's stunt coordinating, there's stunt choreography, there's action choreography, which is choreographing the moves much like a dance sequence or a musical. And then there's the orchestration of the stunts, which most stunt coordinators do. And then there's action design. Action design goes to the next level of, while you're in the script and prep phase, how is this sequence going to be executed? How is it going to look? How is it going to be designed? And when we did the first John Wick, we kind of executed what we've always wanted to do in film. And I think in Hollywood, style, tone, like, the mise-en-scène of every project comes to fruition in the dialogue scenes, and the photography, and the lighting. Very rarely does it come together with action sequences. But then again, you have, I think the way Steven Spielberg executed the opening sequence in Saving Private Ryan. Nailed the tone, stayed with the character, told you something about the characters. It was incredibly well designed. It was well thought out. It was well executed. It tied directly into the story. Fantastic. It shot the way he wanted to shoot to give you that frenetic energy and keep you with the character. We're very similar in how we want to design our genre action films, whether it's martial arts or cars or motorcycles or explosions. We want you to learn something from the character. We want you to appreciate the tone. And we want you to see the action. So yes, we like wider shots. We like seeing real professionals, whether there are acting performers or stunt performers, execute the choreography or the stunts that we want you to see. There are a few exceptions to what I'm going to say, but nowadays, action is looked at as the execution only. It's not where we're going to do this, we'll let the second unit guys do it, the stunt guys come in, because they don't want to spend the money on prep, or they want to spend the time shooting it. The first thing that gets crunched in budget wars, which everyone has to go through, is either prep or days to shoot. So a lot of times you get an action sequence that's shot and executed, not so much to show things, but to hide things or hide imperfections. If the cast member hasn't had enough time to train, you'll shoot him tighter. You won't see as much because you don't want to see the imperfections of technique or choreography. If you use a stunt double, you're going to want to hide the double, so you're doing a lot of over-the-shoulders or super wide shots or super tight shots. You're trying to hide things. If you don't have the time, if the guns don't work or the weapons don't work or the car doesn't start or you can't go fast enough, it's more about hiding and not showing the audience as opposed to a lot of prep. Great professionals executing at a very high level that have been thoroughly rehearsed. And I mean rehearsed with the camera teams, the actual on-camera performers. Your cinematographer has lit a way that will entice you not just aesthetically, but the lights will be hidden so you can shoot wide shots. Pretty much the whole crew is in on the action. Pretty much just how the rest of Hollywood does dialogue scenes. I don't know why they just throw it to the wind when it comes to action sequences. We just put the same care into our action scenes that we try to put into our acting or our dialogue scenes. It's not hard. It's the same process most directors use for all their other scenes. For some reason, it just doesn't translate to action. I don't know. It's always a mystery to us.
Well, I have to confess, I fell in love with action films through Asian movies, especially Jackie Chan and Chow Yun-fat, people like that. And I had a chance to interview Jackie Chan, and he talks about one of his big influences was Gene Kelly and learning how to shoot action through that. Is that something that you also appreciate?
I'll do you one better. I've worked with Jackie and his team quite a bit, and Donnie Yen and his team, and Jet Li and his team, and huge influences. I love the Asian cinema. Love it, especially the 80s with the Hong Kong action stuff, as well as Japanese animation. And you go back a step further to Akira Kurosawa. If you were to go look at John Wick or John Wick 2, you would see an amazing similarity in composition to Sergio Leone, Bernardo Bertolucci, and Akira Kurosawa. We just like that. But I think our true influence is almost back to silent film. I love Buster Keaton. I really enjoyed Harold Lloyd and Charlie Chaplin. If you can tell a story with the volume down, and you can still get what the movie's about, and you can still see the emotion on the character's face, if you can still see the chasing and get what's going on, I think that's a big part. My partner and I, Dave Leitch, on the first movie, really tried to do a silent film. That's why Keanu's character says very little, and it's all done with emotion and stuff like that. I think that's a good way to tell the story and have the dialogue and everything else as backup and really say things that mean something when they mean something. But that's just that's just what appeals to me.
It seems like, too, from Asian action films that they do value the time put into that stunt work. And is that something that you also got when you worked with Yuen Woo-ping on The Matrix? Is that something kind of you got to see on a Hollywood film? And did that inspire you in any way?
Well, what we really liked about working with Yuen Woo-ping was the methodology behind his action. The amount it was rehearsed, the amount of training that went into the cast. Most stunt teams rehearse a great deal with stunt doubles and the stuntmen and a little bit with the actors. We throw every penny we can into training the cast member. And we just don't train them to memorize moves. Keanu was trained on this one to be a practical 3-gun firearm technician, meaning he was trained in rifle pistol with live fire, in a very safe environment up at a professional shooting range, as well as trained with SWAT and military personnel, and then brought to the choreography teams to accentuate that. Our best judo and jiu-jitsu martial art people were used to train them. So rather than fake being good, we just trained Keanu to be good. Basically, we just trained him to be a stunt guy, so he could learn on the fly. Now, we got that from very much the Hong Kong thing because it allows you to shoot differently. If your cast member is just a rock star and can do all the choreography that we want, you don't have to cut, or you can choose where the cut goes. It's more of a directorial edit to give you pacing or to give you emotion or to give you some kind of storytelling ability, as opposed to our actors only trained to do 3 moves at a time, which forces the edit. Or I have to use a stunt double, which forces the angle. Or I can't see because the other stunt guys haven't been trained. Or the cameraman hasn't been on rehearsal, so the camera has got an 80-pound camera on his shoulder trying to keep up with all the gun. It always comes through, again, trying to hide what's not there. The Hong Kong teams, their cameramen were ex-stunt guys. Their editors were from the editor to the director to the performers, that link or that production line was all on the same page. They were all at rehearsals. They were all there. So on John Wick 1 and 2, our editor was there. Our cinematographer was at the stunt rehearsals. Our stunt team, our cast members were overtrained. And that's where you got it. Now take that, when we work with the Wachowskis, they took the attention to detail of other directors in acting, lighting, and Wu Ping's attention to stunts, and they're the ones that put it all together. And one thing you'll get, which I completely agree with, they didn't see a distinction. At the time, even myself and probably Wu Ping and the other action teams that were involved, it was the acting scenes and then the action scenes, the Wachowskis saw no difference. They were one and the same. And they really, truly believe that. That's why there really was not a giant second unit on The Matrix. It was, our first unit directors carrying the story right through. The dojo scene in the first Matrix is a literal dialogue scene. It is an actualization of Keanu and Lawrence Fishburne coming to terms with who Neo is becoming. Just because they're doing kung fu, they might as well have been sitting at a table sharing a drink. It didn't make any difference to the directors. They just continued the story, and the action was just another set piece. And that was a huge eye-opener at the time. You should never stop. The action is the story is the action.
And when you're choreographing stunt scenes or deciding to shoot them, how much do you plan in advance in terms of storyboarding it out or planning the choreography, and then how much of it is reaction to the actual location once you get there? I mean, do you also allow for some amount of improvising in terms of what you find there?
It's absolutely unique to every situation. We have a standard. I guess I'm fortunate. I have a background in action, a background in directing, a background in storytelling, a background in writing. So it starts with me, and I conceptualize what I want this character to be. We know we want John Wick to do a different kind of gun work. We want to do close quarter work. Okay, now I go with the stunt scenes. What martial art fits this best? And we'll develop our own martial art based on jiu-jitsu or judo or sambo or tactical 3-gun work or, how the Navy SEALs clear houses. We'll come up with that, and we'll kind of steal from everybody. Our stunt team will go out and play and shoot video viz or shoot test footage on video of what we want this to look like with our stunt teams. From there, if it's a gunfight in this, okay, what environment gives us the best way to make this look cool? For tactical gun work or close quarter gun work, the way we want to shoot, maze, hallways, tight quarters kind of thing, museums, catacombs, warehouses. So we look for those locations. And then once we find a location where I go, oh yeah, this is great, I bring in my stunt teams, and they spend 2 or 3 weeks adapting all the stuff that we've already conceptualized and conforming it to the locations. Throw in, if you're going to do big car sequences, that's a little harder to just go out and video viz. So if you do car sequences or big cranes or explosions, that becomes more storyboard or animatics that help to complement what we do live action-wise. So depending on the scale and the size of the sequence, that determines the methodology that we prep it.
You brought up car stunts. There were amazing car stunts in this film. It looked like it hurt.
The benefit of having 20 years experience in the stunt business is all the right guys. So having been a second unit director for so long in my career, the question is, okay, now who's going to be my second unit director? And I brought in 2 very close friends. To be my main stunt coordinator was J.J. Perry, a martial art choreographer and designer in his own right, and a very good friend of mine, Darren Prescott, who I consider to be the best second unit car action sequence designer. And when you don't have a lot of money or time, which car chases can be, you have no time to waste just driving around the block really fast. So I go to my friend Darren and say, look, I want this to be the equivalent of Kung Fu but with cars. So he's like, okay, that means we're going to hit a lot of stuff. I'm like, yep, I don't want any car left untouched. So Darren will go through and design all these sequences and train Keanu to actually drive, because we want, just like we want Keanu in the gun sequences, we want Keanu in the car sequences. And Keanu's already a pretty handy driver when we got a hold of him. Darren and his driving double name Jeremy Fry will go out and teach how to drift, how to spin, how to lock, and how to crash vehicles. So now we have Keanu Reeves not just in the gunfights, we have Keanu Reeves actually crashing into cars and hitting people, which he actually runs over a couple stunt guys, which is great. So it's the same kind of process. Get the right guy, somebody that's creatively amped. And again, sometimes being creative doesn't cost more or take more time. It's just brain power. It's sitting down with the right creative individuals and coming up with stuff that is financially independent of what you really want to do creatively. And Darren designed, I think, a very interesting sequence in the beginning and a very interesting sequence in the warehouse.
It was great stunt work because, I see a lot of action films, and I really appreciated how it surprised me, because you get used to certain kinds of stunts.
We tried to break the mold. Again, it's just, even for us, it's a challenge. Again, this is only my second directorial adventure. So you try to take the same attitude that we take to our other films. We try not to just duplicate. It's very easy to be, okay, we're well known as a martial art choreography company. We are an action. We could take, and I have so many fight scenes already choreographed and on video, I could take the same ones and just use them over and over again. What we try to do is take principles and attributes of certain things that we love and carry those throughout in our method and our process. But the actual, we try not to look back. So when John Wick was done, we like, okay, I can use nothing from that film. Next, how do we reinvent? And that, it's, I'm not going to lie to you, it's difficult, it's hard, it's frustrating, and there's always the temptation to go back to what you know. You just can't. You really can't, because you'd be bored and like, you'd regret it the rest of your career when you watch movies. So it's like, okay, what didn't we do? What haven't we seen? And again, you can't waste time. Rather than drive the car on really fast and try to mimic something like Civil War, who has 6 to 10 weeks to do a car chase, we have 6 days. How do we make it interesting? It's just not about going fast. It's like, what does he do with the car? What is he? And again, it comes back to story. It has, because again, I'm very fortunate. I have a cast member that is very, very collaborative. So Keanu can sit in, one of our action meetings and go, John Wick wouldn't run. He'd just ram you with a car. We're like, great. That one sentence is what we're going to put. John Wick, he's going to try to get out because he doesn't want to fight. But then he's like, it's not really about the car. And his mentality is not evasion, it is destruction and collision. So we're going to base it on that. So John Wick if he can't shoot you, he's just going to hit you with a car. And that's kind of how we design the sequence. That simple.
Well, let's talk a little bit about 8711. And when you started this company with David Leitch, was your plan initially that you were going to move into directing, or was that something that kind of came up later?
It was kind of a two-pronged thing. Dave and I have always wanted to at least action direct since fairly early in our stunt careers. As soon as I found out that was a thing, I was like, that's something I'd be interested to do, especially because I love martial arts. I love martial art choreography, especially, again, like we talked about, from Asian cinema. And the best way to bring what you create or what you choreograph to fruition is being the director. You can control how it's edited, you control how it's shot, which gives you a truer version of what you want to do. So I think that was always there. At the same time, after working so much with people like Yuen Woo-ping and the Hong Kong stunt teams and the Chinese stunt teams, was like, okay, there's a need in the Western cinema for something very, not just, most people don't know how stunts work or the stunt community works. It's usually the producers hire a stunt coordinator who kind of oversees it, maybe hires a fight choreographer or a fight coordinator. They hire the guys 3-4 days out from the sequence, maybe a week out. They get a little bit of rehearsal time with the actor. They train them. Martial art instructor trains them, or a personal trainer, and then they kind of just teach the actor to memorize the moves and hope that they're going to get something good out of it. Very, very few times is the cinematographer or the cameraman brought into rehearsals. We kind of go more with the Asian cinema methodology, like we've explained, where we want everybody involved. In order to control that, we needed to be slightly higher up the ladder and slightly more experienced. So we just focused on that and tried to really specialize in that. So the two naturally just kind of come together if you get where we fit in the process. And people come to us and go, well, we want this look. Because again, so many times in modern day action films and big movies, you can feel the division between story, okay, cut, action scene, everybody go home, let the stunt team stay. Like, you can feel, like, it's almost jarring to us a lot of times. Like, how can they spend so much money and not care about the... We knew our greatest obstacle when Dave and I did the first movie was like, okay, they're stunt guys, how are they going to do story? How are they going to work with cast? they don't realize that in the second unit you deal so much with cast and you deal so much with story because we're trying to execute the vision of most of the time, a very, very successful director already. So, we spent and did our due diligence as much as we could to put as much love as we could into all the mise en scène, the story, the lighting. We wanted people to know that we're not just concerned about action. We're concerned about the story A to B, as any good director should, which is a bit of a wacky kind of conundrum that we see nowadays because so many directors are very interested in that stuff. Like they'll tell stories or whatever the lines, but they won't learn anything about action. Well, the second unit guy will do it. We learned about storytelling. You guys can learn about action. It would make a better film. Don't give up on the action. That's my biggest. And the audience should not accept that. Make the directors go back and learn their ABCs of action. They should have an opinion. They should have what's going to show. You can't just shake the camera around and hope your editor will figure it out 10 weeks from now. Like that is when someone like Paul Greengrass did that was an aesthetic choice. He's done plenty of films where he knows, and that was a phonetic choice to wake the audience up a little bit. And I thought it was a good choice. The first time I saw it on the Second Born, I thought it was a very creative choice. Most people do it nowadays to hide, like we talked about, and I think that's a directorial mistake. Like if that's your style, great, but if that's your fallback, get out of jail free card, I think you've missed the bus on what you really need to do.
So then how did you move from being a stunt company to actually getting John Wick made? Was that a difficult process to get backers to say, yeah, let's let these stunt guys actually helm a film?
Before there was John Wick, there was 2 or 3 offers made to each Dave and I of different kind of films, usually a low budget or medium budget action film that was thrown at us. It just didn't, when we say action, I prefer genre action. I like martial art sequences, or I like what we call meta realities or hyper real worlds. Like your Bonds, where it's not quite real. Or John Wick is of course it's a great example because it's what we wanted to do. It's a hyper-real world that doesn't really exist, but we make it feel like it almost could. It's world creation. We like that kind of thing. Peter Jackson did it with Lord of the Rings. George Lucas did it with Star Wars. There's same old mythological tales. We just did it in modern day rather than period or sci-fi. So we were looking for something like that, something that would let us do something different. If someone hands you a Navy SEAL war script, you're stuck in that world to be tactically correct. And you try to bring a true vision and you can still tell a good story. It's just for what we wanted to do with action and what we wanted to do with the visual style, say like an anime or a graphic novel style, it wasn't the right fit. So we kind of held off. And actually it was Keanu that was just out of the blue phone call going, "Hey, what's going on? How you been? Good. You? Hey, I got the script. I want to send it to you. Really like the guy in it, but it needs a little bit of, it needs something. Would you mind giving it a read?" And I think that was on a Friday. And by Monday, I was telling him, I want to pitch on this. I want to direct it. And I think Keanu had specifically known that because he knew we were trying to direct. And I think he just found it, and he put 2 and 2 together, and he's really the reason it all came together. He was already attached at that point. So in answer to your question, it took a lot of faith and trust on his part to have a first-time director come in and pretty much be in control of his career for a show, because that could have gone bad too. Luckily it didn't, but he had the faith and trust in us to direct a film. So when you have Keanu Reeves, who's I think a legitimate Hollywood star, say, "Hey, would you want to direct a movie with me?" It was a long wait, and it was hard to get over certain humps and hard to get trust, but we were very fortunate. We had somebody like him pushing us up the ladder, so it wasn't that hard.
Well, it seems basically the way you're talking about it is it was a payoff for all the care you were taking along the way, that he trusted you, that you could bring this to fruition.
However you want to explain karmic debt is fine. But yeah, luck, karmic debt, whatever. It's all good. I'm lucky.
And what else does 8711 do besides your particular, directing projects and work? Because you guys have a whole stunt company.
Yeah, we have a stunt company. We specialize in the training of martial arts stunt teams. I think we have a very elite martial arts stunt team that deals solely with training cast members to become proficient in certain skill sets that are used for on-screen performance. And we're an action design company, which means you come to us and we'll help you write a great car chase, all the way from words to paper to cars to pavement.
And it seems like with John Wick 2 that you're taking the opportunity to develop more as a director as well. I mean, not just the stunts kick ass, but it seems like you've kind of upped your game there too.
Yeah, I get bored really easy. So no, I consider it like it's a great opportunity if you're going to be 15 hours a day somewhere. Again, I have this mantra that I learned from my father and my grandfather. It's like, if you're the smartest guy in the room, you're in the wrong room. So I try to get people much, much better than me and much, much smarter than me on my crew. My cinematographer, Dan Louston, my editor, Evan Schiff, production designer, Kevin Cavanaugh, all far more talented at what they do than what I do. So it's a challenge to keep up with them and try to expand what weird pictures I have in my head. How do I get them out and learn as much as I can from them? So I think as a filmmaker, if you're not doing something like that and challenging other people, they won't challenge you back. So I think it's a good, I don't know, I enjoy learning.
Well, with the success of John Wick and now John Wick 2 coming out, do you think you've proven to Hollywood to a certain degree that they will trust you to use kind of your model of filmmaking that says, yes, let's take more time doing this and maybe, integrate the action sequences more? Do you think that there's a little more of a proven track record now that maybe you could get something else made that you really want?
Yeah, that's a good question. I find most, in any sense of the word, established order is always a slow learner to evolution. I'll just say that. So, I'm sure there are many out there that'll get it, or I'm sure there's many out there that would get it once they heard the words, or I'm sure there's many out there that get it but just haven't found a way to process or how to execute it. Hopefully, because again, always fun to be the spearhead, to be the first guy to do it, but then it's really great. Nothing would make me happier than see some other director or something inspire me by doing a better job than we did. That would make us do a better job, so that would be great. I'm very competitive, so it'd be fun to see that. It'd be great.
Do you think it's going to be easier to do the kind of stunt work, the combination of, because it doesn't seem like there is that dividing line between the stunts and the directing, that it's one continuum, and do you hope that that's going to be something you'll be able to do easily in the future?
I think in our process or in our thought or in our planning, I think it's easy to always write down. I think execution is always tricky. So hopefully it'll never be that easy. I would hate to take it for granted, but it's always challenging. Again, the more you get into Hollywood, the more scripts you read, the more projects. Everyone's got its own uniqueness to it. So you have to apply. You might have your standard axioms, I'm going to do it this way, but it completely changes. The cast can change it, the crew can change it, the location can change it, the people you're dealing with can change it. So I like to hold true with that mentality for right now. I don't know, interview me after the next film and I'll see how it goes.
So you say challenges, and you don't like to kind of rest back on things you've already achieved. So what do you see for the future of yourself in 8711?
I'd like to see us continue to expand. I'd like to see us continue to take projects that are a bit more challenging, that are a little bit more defining. I consider The Matrix a very defining. I've had the chance to work on I would say 3 fairly defining projects in my career, whether it was a stuntman, a stunt coordinator, a second director, or a director. I was fortunate to work with a good friend of mine named Brandon Lee on the movie The Crow, which I thought Alex Prost did an amazing job of bringing. I think that was one of the first times we ever saw a graphic novel-esque film successfully executed in the way it was intended by its original author. I was fortunate enough to work, obviously, with the Wachowskis on The Matrix, which I thought was a defining moment of the time period for action, about bringing martial art action and choreography into, or Hong Kong-style cinema or Japanese animation, into mainstream Hollywood, because before that it really wasn't. I got to work with Zack Snyder on 300, which I consider visually, again, the next level in graphic novel exposition. And then, I consider John Wick, at least in action, to be a step ahead of most of the contemporary action kind of films. I'd like to see us continue to do that kind of thing, to work with people like the Wachowskis or like Zack Snyder or like, David Fincher or Spielberg, or people that are ahead that want something more and something different than status quo. I mean, if we can continue to work with those kind of people and that kind of clientele, I'd be really happy.
What do you think has been the key to your success with 8711? Do you think there's some sort of defining characteristic about you guys that made you so successful?
Probably, let's see, political correctness, apathy, and stubbornness. No, we do what we love. And, fortunately, what we love to do is something that is aesthetically pleasing to other people. We like creating cool choreography. We like cool action. We just like it. It's what we all grew up with. Every member of both our stunt teams enjoys that. I think if our facility and our company did not exist, our 20 or so odd stuntmen would still be doing what they're doing, just, in barns and parking lots and old gyms. I think we've got the right group of people to do that, strive to be good at whatever they do. I mean, we have a lot of type A personalities and professional athletes that don't know how not to succeed or know how not to be creative. I think that's the driving force behind us.
Maybe you're a little like John Wick, too. You have a very singular vision of moving forward and not taking obstacles.
I don't know what you'd call that. But unbalanced lifestyle, I guess. We love what we do. I don't think any of us could tie our shoes, but we're very, very good at what we do professionally. So that's good. I don't know. It's just a drive. You wake up in the morning, and again, fortunately, we like going to work. Like, work for us is an expression of the people we want to be. So I think that's a big thing. It's not a job.
Are there any action stars or any actors that you would really like to partner with on a story?
Again, over the last 20 years, we've been super fortunate. I can tell you one thing, we've never worked twice with someone we didn't like, so that's good. If you look at our company's resume, we've worked with some amazing people. I mean, everyone from Sylvester Stallone to Arnold Schwarzenegger to Jason Statham to Steven Seagal to Hugh Jackman, Matt Damon, Keanu Reeves, Brad Pitt, Chris Hemsworth, Chris Evans, Scarlett Johansson. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. Jason Momoa now with Aquaman, Joel Kinnaman, who is a real player. I mean, they're awesome. There's some really, really awesome people out there, and to find those people and actually to get them into our facility and see the professionalism and the drive and how much they care, and just know that you're helping create a hero, you're helping create a character that 30 million people are going to see is kind of a rush.
Now, I know you've inspired quite a few other stuntmen and filmmakers, so what kind of advice would you have to people who kind of want to follow in your footsteps, or at least be able to exercise their craft in a more effective way?
Two things. I would say one, and I know everyone says it, but I believe it wholly, don't quit. Don't ever quit. Opinion is just that, it's opinion. When I was going to school, I said, don't go to karate class, don't go to karate class, it'll never, okay, karate class is paid for a couple houses. So it's done really well. The other thing is, ask once, ask twice, learn. If you don't know something and you feel like you're stupid, you ask it once, you're only stupid that one time. If you don't ask, you're never going to know, and you have to fake being smart. Just ask. Like, don't be ashamed of not knowing something. Ask and learn. Everybody's job on set, just learn, because you only have to be done once. So just keep going. Learn everything you can about everyone's job, talk to everybody on set, and just never give up.
I take it that's what you did on a lot of your films?
Yeah, I'm tenacious.
So have you ever thought about doing an action film that centers more on female?
That would be, that's my biggest box to check. I would like to do not so much a female John Wick or anything like that, but I'd like to do something where I took a really, really talented actress that wasn't associated with action and transform this. I was a big fan of the first Bourne Identity. Matt Damon, to that point, was considered a very good actor, but he wasn't considered an action star in any way. What that movie did for him, no one saw it coming, and actually endeared you to him more. I'd love to find a great actress that really wanted to invest some of her time, like some of the guys do, and become this, and I'd like to be a big part of that. I think that's probably my number one goal right now.
Well, that's good to hear, and I'm really glad to hear you said you didn't want to just do a female John Wick, because the gender swap thing doesn't work. Well, I want to thank you very much for your time.
No, my pleasure. Thank you very much.
Whoever comes, I'll kill them all.
The man, the myth, the legend. John Wick.
That was stuntman-turned-director Chad Stahelski. After seeing John Wick Chapter 2 with its expanded universe, elegant international locations, and slick production values, well, I think the Bond franchise should seriously consider asking him to do the next installment. Common worked with Stahelski for the first time on John Wick Chapter 2. He braved the snow in New York to come to an NPR studio and speak to me by phone. I asked if he had seen John Wick before accepting his role in Chapter 2, and if he went into the sequel knowing what to expect.
I saw the first John Wick when I first had the opportunity to become a part of the Chapter 2. It was like I had heard about John Wick, but I hadn't seen it, and I watched it because my agent had called me and said, hey, you may potentially be up for a role in John Wick 2. And I watched John Wick, and I was, like, thoroughly impressed. And, it kind of caught me by surprise because it was like it had the elements of what I love in movies, where it's just fun sometimes. Not every movie has to be serious, so it was fun. But I loved the lead character, and it didn't take itself too serious. It just was a vibe to the movie. So yeah, I saw the first one and really, really enjoyed it.
And tell me about the character you play, Cassian, in Chapter 2.
Well, Cassian in Chapter 2, I'm chief of security for one of the top bosses in this underworld, and my character is like a rival to John Wick as far as his skill level, him being an assassin, his intelligence. He's just at the level of John Wick. So, and my character speaks Italian, which was a lot of fun for me as an actor, just to get into speaking Italian, especially as we filmed in Rome. Just traveling around Rome, knowing I knew a few words was exciting. But Cassian is a smart guy. Like, he goes by the code that these assassins live by, and he's an honorable person. He's not like a bad guy. So when my friends always ask me, "Do you playing a bad guy in John Wick?" I'm like, "Nah, I'm just playing this assassin that when called to do his job, he does it and does it very well."
And you guys seem to share a certain sense of professional courtesy.
Yeah, we definitely have it's a reverence and a respect there for John Wick and Cassian. I look at it as two rivals that really don't dislike each other. They and Keanu and I discussed at one point they probably had worked together on certain missions, but when it's time, it's two professionals that do take care of their business, that do have respect for the culture of being assassins and taking care of that world. So we honor each other, but when it's time to go to work, we go to work.
Now, in this particular film, it's not like the film stops the story to do action. And it seems like the way you guys fight and the way you guys participate in these action sequences help to define your characters.
Yes. I truly was informed even more about my character as I started training and learning different techniques. It was like, it helped me to shape my character, and so he just wouldn't be this physical guy. He had to be a well-rounded individual, and you could, as you said, you could tell within the fights, we try to keep those as stories too. Like, we try to keep those as like a scene in the journey, and you do get to know these characters more, and you get to know not only their force, but in different ways, how they maneuver and how smart they are. That's all part of the being of who these people are. And yeah, the fights definitely move the story along. And we look at John Wick because we do enjoy, seeing all this action, but it also has to be something for me, like, that I just go into the world and can enjoy and like connect to some of these characters in different ways. And for surely, when I watch John Wick, I relate to John Wick, and I wanted that same feeling with Cassian, where you could respect him and feel connected to him. What I found about Chad is that he really knows how to create a world. He was really from my first conversation with him, he let me know that the intensity would be there when it came to training, and I told him I was all for it. My heroes are like Muhammad Ali, and people who were mentally strong and sometimes had to be physically strong. So he really gave us like a direction of how to really shape these characters, and also like the details, and whether it was a tie pin or whether it was a watch, and the way you would hold your cup when you're having a drink. We discussed all these details, and I think that's what I saw when I saw the first John Wick, and that's what you get with John Wick Chapter 2, is you really get this world. And Chad knew how to create the world where you can let go. And when you go to a movie, you go to movies, some movies you go to escape from the world, some you go to, that you hope will help change the world. And this is definitely a movie where you can escape into the world of John Wick. And yeah, Chad was really just from the beginning through every moment was really particular about the details and had a vision and was able to communicate that vision. And we also were able to collaborate. And one thing about him too is like, he works with an intent. Like he will step in and start showing you the fight moves himself, because he's equipped to do that. He's a very skilled fighter and martial artist, and he's been doing this for a while. So he was able to do that. But along with that, he's one of those guys that's like we'll rehearse and he'll love it. He'll love at the rehearsals, and when we get to the set, he'll come up with new things for you to do, which is sometimes challenging but fun.
Now, he does bring a different sensibility to how he does action scenes, different from what most American films are like. So how was that in terms of, when you actually came to the scenes that required intense fighting or gunplay?
Well, I mean, it turned out for me like it turned out to be a wonderful experience, and it definitely had its intensity because, sometimes when you're filming those scenes, there's so many other things going on outside of just the scene, whether it's like time, you're fighting with time just because the daylight may be coming, because we would film a lot during the nights. We just don't have time for whatever reason. But what he was really able to do was like, okay, well, we have this choreographed, and this is what the fight this is what takes place. But he was able to get into when we got to the scenes, be able to say, hey, let's change this here. Why don't you try this? When things went wrong, he was able to really flow with it and create. I felt that it was a real creative process when it came to just like whether it was dialogue scenes or just action scenes. He kept it very creative and a spontaneity that I actually like, is as dangerous as it can be, because when you're doing all this action, if you've rehearsed it, that's the safer route. But sometimes, when you get there and it needs something new and you feel something different, he was able to bring that and be present. And I think it brought life to a lot of what we did.
He also seems to like employing these long takes, wider angles, which puts a lot more burden on you as the actor because you are expected to do a lot more of the fighting yourself.
Yeah, well, I mean, I actually take pride in doing the fighting. I mean, I'm the guy I'm always saying I don't want my stunt guy to work. I don't want my stunt double to work. I mean, I want him to get paid, but I don't want him to have to be in on the scenes. I really take a pride in that being me on the screen. And I told Chad that when we first got on the phone to talk about me playing this character, I was like, look, I want to be one of the great actors that can do action scenes and deliver. And I know you are at the highest level. I know 8711. His company is at the highest level when it comes to that. So I'm willing to do whatever the work, and I'm letting him know I was capable. So when I knew we were doing long sequences and long shots, I was all for it. And, Keanu is the same way. I mean, that's why when you see John Wick or John Wick 2, you see Keanu doing the stunts. You see him doing the work. And that for me, it keeps you in the movie. It keeps you in the world of John Wick, and you believe these characters more. If you start looking at other people doing the work, then it could take you out of a movie. And I think everybody that Chad decides to bring to the table is an actor who can deliver the work, deliver it and do their own work and own stunts. And I love the long fight sequences, because one of my favorite movies when it comes to fighting and action was a movie called The Raid.
Oh, yeah.
And it was, yeah. And I always was like, man, I want to do something at that level. And I felt like, we were stepping into that zone with John Wick Chapter 2.
So what kind of training did you do and what kind of work did you do with 8711?
Well, it started with just basic conditioning and like flexibility exercises, and then it matriculated to martial arts, jiu-jitsu, some kung fu, and then I started doing knife work and some gun work, and I would implement what Chad and 8711 like to call knife fu and gung fu. We implemented that into like the fight sequences. So it started with the basics, and then I just would progress. And once I got everything, to a certain point where I could like go out on and do it in a scene, then I started to work with Keanu. Initially it was like working with a partner who was part of the stunt team, but then, I prepared enough to get to work, with Keanu, and we went from there. But it's definitely a lot of martial arts, and it's like learning new languages. Like, it really is, because I never really knew much about jiu-jitsu. I would see it or see the words and ride past places where people train doing jiu-jitsu, but I never knew what the language was. Language as far as fighting. So
what Chad does is often referred to as fight choreography. So is this really kind of like a dance for you when you get into these fights?
It truly is a dance. It has the rhythm of, you have to have a rhythm to it, and you learn your partner's rhythm. The thing that's sometimes tricky is you may train a lot with a stunt double, and then once it's time to get into the scenes, you work with, whoever your partner is. Mine happened to be Keanu, and thank God he was doing a lot of rehearsals, because we got our rhythm down and got our dance together. But I guess the difference lies in, it's a certain intensity when you're throwing a punch or throwing an elbow, or, giving someone a knee that takes away from the dance like aspect of it. But it's still the overall pitch it is a dance.
So in terms of your training, like how many hours were you doing, and how much kind of training did you do before you started shooting?
Well, I know I did at least 3 to 4 months of training, and it would start from it was probably like just from 9 to 3 each day. And from there, I would have to go home and work on it too in the mirror. Like, okay, let me get this together. Like, let me work on it. And I definitely when we were filming in Rome, I could remember going to my hotel room just really working intensely on it. So it was months of training, and definitely hours throughout the day, and that's what it takes. And at that point, like I said, you do all that training to prepare so that you can get those scenes and the choreography right. And if Chad, which everybody who works with him knows, he's gonna throw you a curveball. So he's gonna give you something different to do. No matter how much he says he loved the rehearsal, and like he loved it, what he saw on tape, what we've done from the rehearsal, he's going to come up with something new. I can remember, like, filming in Rome, and it was the start of a scene where my character Cassian hits John Wick with the car, and then we had to figure out what was the next step, and he wanted me to jump over the hood of the car and slide with the gun. And for the first times, I couldn't get it right, and I was like, oh man, I felt like I was letting the whole team down. But eventually, my adrenaline just got there, and I just was. I can remember jumping over the hood, and Chad was like, "Wait, you just jumped over the hood?" I was like, "What?" And then he's like, "It looked good though. It looked good." So I was happy about that. But working with him, you just have to you have to go through your training so that you could be prepared to do anything.
Well, I got to interview him, and I have to say he seems like the kind of guy who always likes to raise the bar.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, he definitely likes to raise the bar. And it was funny, he and Keanu go way back since Matrix days. since the Matrix days. You know, I could tell Keanu, and Keanu would say this to me, that he wanted to make sure Chad was happy. Like, we would do certain takes and we felt pretty good about it. But if Chad didn't come over and show that smile, or, you know, just give us the energy that was excellent, then we both felt like, nah, we want to do it again. Like, we got to deliver. So he is a person that sets the bar high, and you know, I want to deliver at that high bar level, because it ultimately comes out to make the film great, to make people love the movie.
And did he talk at all about kind of the influences he had in terms of what he was trying to do? Did he talk about, you know, how Hong Kong action films were kind of showing him a different way of shooting?
He didn't speak much about that, but he did tell me he enjoyed some of the films and what they were doing, the Hong Kong action films. And he would joke with me and talk to me about how, doesn't this feel like when we were kids, when you were a kid and you just, you know, would get into, you would see Bruce Lee or someone doing something and want to do it, you want to imitate those things. And it's like, you get to be that kid that can do it now. You know, I could see how much of a passion he has for martial arts and action and really movies. As much as I could say John Wick obviously is an action movie, it's still something that you like about the characters, and he makes sure these characters like are alive, and you connect to them in some way or another. So I think his passion for movies comes out. For him to watch those Hong Kong films and know that this is the next level is, to me, is really cool. And I think that's the world that he's able to kind of like conjure up, is like taking those elements and taking the joy that he had as a kid, like watching these movies and his experiences from working on The Matrix and all these other films that he's done now, bringing all that and saying, I'm going to raise the bar.
Have you seen the finished film? Because I'm curious if, you know, how shooting those scenes compares to seeing the finished product on the screen.
I have seen, you know, the finished product, and I was very pleased. That, you know, it's hard when you're watching the movie for the first time, because you're so critical, and you know, especially when you as an actor first get on the screen, it's like, oh man, you're critiquing everything. Your heart is beating like, what? Oh, man. But watching the scenes and just watching the film itself, I was very pleased. And also the work that you put in, you see it at another level, because obviously they cut and try to keep the best takes. And sometimes some things you like, oh, I wish I could have done that better. But when I looked at the film, I definitely felt grateful, I felt pleased, and I was like, man, this really looks good. Like, really, I felt we had moved along in the John Wick story, in the John Wick like saga. We moved it along and respected it and gave homage and respect to the first John Wick, but also took you deep into the world, and the fight scenes are heightened. It's growing. It's getting better. So I was happy with it. And you know, you see some things that may get cut, but a lot of my stuff didn't get cut, so I was happy.
Well, I was just curious if you felt like his approach to doing the action from the shooting stage, if you felt like on screen it really paid off and delivered something that seems a little bit fresh and new.
Oh, his approach, truly, seeing it on screen, I felt like this is a fresh take on what I've seen in action movies in a long time, like in a way that, like, really honestly probably since the last John Wick, but even more like it's some of the things that we did and some of the things that he accomplished in this film is, I was like, man, this is the highest level. I was really looking at it like, man, I'm excited. I can't believe I'm in this movie. Like, I was like, oh, this is really great. It felt like he brought something really fresh to this genre of movies, and that's what we want to do. We want to make it. We want to see it grow. We want to see how we could push the envelope and allow people to enjoy things in a new way.
So I understand he calls kind of the style of action he does as kind of a gun fu.
Well, this is the thing. He has different ways of, like, when you're utilizing a gun, and he combines that with certain martial arts techniques. Yeah, he comes up with this thing called gun fu, and then, like, I was utilizing a knife, and he would put that with these different techniques of martial arts, and that's where the knife fu came from. So, I mean, it sounds funny, but I mean, probably if you were using the pencil like John Wick does, that's the pencil fu.
Well, it seems like I'm a big fan of Hong Kong action films, and it seems like what he brings to it is he takes all that martial arts action, but then he adds in kind of more American weaponry to it, as opposed to, like sword play or something.
Yeah, well, I think that's where the freshness comes in, because you get somebody who studied. I mean, but he's not that. Like, when we were working, he studied, some of the Hong Kong techniques, but he also was. I was looking at they would send me tapes of MMA fighters, and I was like, they had me studying fighting like I had never watched before, boxing. So he definitely takes from some of the Asian influence, but Americanizes it and comes up with his own vision and style, and I think that's what gives the audience something new to look at.
And how do you think he was different as a director because of his stunt background? I mean, do you think that, made him better at kind of putting together an action film?
Well, I think it's just because his stunts background, he knows what works. He knows how it's gonna translate in film, and when you're watching the story, he knows that the film, that the action has to have a story to it. And he told me that. He was like, we want this to have a story to it. He knows that, and he has an instinct that really is like, if something's not working, he knows how to re-energize it. Like, I could remember him, like, really talking to us about keeping this intensity up in this fight scene right before we crashed through the windows of the Continental, John Wick and Cassian. Before we crashed through the windows, he said this has to be a intensity. You got to be to the point where you want to rip, like, his heart out, like, you just, because once we go through the windows, we can't fight anymore. And when we end up in the scene sitting at the bar, it kind of makes it funnier. It brings a different dynamic. So I think he's able to see, hey, I got to bring this intensity, bring these different type of colors to these fights, but also in the path of the story, this is where it will work, and this is how it works. And that stunt background definitely helped him to experience that, see that, and know. Also, when he has an actor, he knows how to draw off their strength, or whatever their strengths are. Like, Ruby Rose used to box, so he knew that. Well, he didn't know it initially, but as she was working out with, he was like, wait, you boxed? Okay. So he let her character have some of that as a strength. So he knows that he can step in, and he knows what the experience is, and he knows also he can push you to the level, to the limit, not to try to hurt you, but he knows, like, okay, we can go another one. We can go another one. Like, it's like when you hear about certain coaches are really good because they play the sport, and I think that's what he brings.
One of the fights I really liked was the one you and Keanu have on the subway, because I love when confined spaces kind of help to define how the fight goes.
Yeah, that fight was it was really we had that choreographed really in a strong way, and I think I was happy with the way it turned out, because in that small space it was difficult because in the rehearsal space we tried to estimate how much space we would have on the train. Once you get on the train and his cameras and his people there, the space, became smaller. And and it was just like, okay, we got to get this done. And it's something about the energy of being in that small space and having to fight in that small space that is something that brings out the animal in you. Like, wow, you have to go, and you all have knives, and you have these, these techniques that you're supposed to do. But it's I can remember that night being very intense, and Keanu and I, when we didn't get it right, Keanu was heated. If he didn't get it right, if I didn't get it right, I was definitely not happy with it. But eventually we got it there, and I think, the scene it definitely had an intensity to it.
So what do you think was the biggest challenge and the biggest satisfaction you got working on this film?
The biggest challenge I would say would be really working out the choreography and then having to execute it at like 4 or 5 in the morning. Just because the scenes were we were filming the scenes throughout the night, so that it was a little challenging with dealing with that, some of the changes that came up. But I look forward to the challenges. That's part of it, and I think it brings certain element of reality to us. And when it's cold, and you can't there's nothing you can do about the cold. So those challenges, I don't know, for me they help me, and I feel like the reward is when I see it on the screen, and it's like you can't fake being cold. You're fighting in the cold. That's just another element that's brought to the story that makes the story even more raw. Like you're on a cobblestone of Rome. You can't fake that. Like that cobblestone it hurts. You're rolling around on that cobblestone. So those challenges turned out to be, things that brought out the best, and I think brought more life to all of the scenes.
And which part of the stunt work did you find the most challenging? Was it like the gun work, the knife work, the
stunt work I found most challenging was the jiu-jitsu, because as a kid I took martial arts I took karate for a year or two. I never got up there in belts, but kicking and punching is something that's kind of natural in that way. But jiu-jitsu is like a different language when it comes to fighting, and just the spinning and the work you do over your shoulders and the sweeps that you're doing. It's like, oh man, I didn't I didn't know they even do this to fight. So that was the most challenging and difficult when it came to the fighting.
So do you feel that the training that he gave you kind of gave you this toolbox to go into, so when you go into these fights, it's like, oh, which tool do I use for this part of the scene? Yeah,
I feel like I can go conquer the world. Meaning I feel like a superhero. I'm looking forward to the next project that I have to do, and it's dealing with action. I'm not saying that that it won't be some new things to learn, but I feel like I've been given a tremendous foundation, a phenomenal foundation from working with Chad in 8711 and Keanu. But just, the base of having 8711 and knowing that I can access them and that I've worked with Chad, I feel like I've worked with some of the greatest and one of the greatest to ever do it. So I'm ready. I'm like, oh, man, bring it. Come on.
All right. Well, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to me.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Beth, and have a great day. All right, peace.
That was Common talking about his experience making John Wick Chapter 2. To get some perspective on what Chad Stahelski is doing to push the envelope on American action films, I spoke with Bay Logan by phone from his Hong Kong home. I let him explain how he became involved in martial arts and then obsessed with Hong Kong action films.
I mean, from when I was very, very young, growing up in a city called Peterborough in England, I was absolutely fascinated by the moving image in all its kind of manifestations, TV, films, and even comic books, which are kind of a moving image. Then martial arts, or what martial arts were available at that time, which was the Avengers TV series, not the Marvel Avengers, but Mr. Steed and Emma Peel, the James Bond movies, and then later the Kung Fu TV series. And I was just absolutely fascinated by every aspect of Asian martial arts and beyond that, Asian culture. And other friends of mine, I think in the 70s, had similar fascination and later moved on to other things. And for some reason, for me, it stuck, and I remain devoted to martial arts, both Asian martial arts, both in terms of practice, research, and as kind of the core of my filmmaking. I also am very involved. I love film, and I'm involved with film in every aspect of every aspect of it. I'm a huge devotee of cinema beyond just Asian martial art movies.
You do martial arts yourself, correct?
I do. I've been training in various martial arts most of my adult life. In the recent years, I've been focused on a style called Honggaku and Hongga Kung Fu, which is from the south of China, from a city called Fatsan. And the most famous exponent of that style is a person called Wong Fei Hong, who's been depicted in more movies than anybody else ever has. I just found that fitted my body type and my disposition. So now I have a school, and I support my teacher to run classes, and I also teach private students myself here in Hong Kong. And for the last 20 years or so, after moving to Hong Kong, I've been involved in the film industry, and I think, as far as I know, I'm the only white guy. It doesn't sound politically correct, but I'm like maybe the only non-Chinese, or I'm the only white guy working in Hong Kong as a writer and a script writer and film producer. And I've been doing that for 20 years now, and have the honor of working with a lot of my heroes along the way. Jackie Chan, Sammo Hung, someone like Donnie Yen, who I think is more than a hero of mine, who's obviously become a very good friend, and he and I have worked together over the years. So it's been quite a ride.
Now, what is it that you feel Hong Kong action films do that's different from what American or Hollywood action films do?
Well, I think there's been definitely Hong Kong was ahead of the curve and has become, in the area of screen combat, been hugely influential on the development of American cinema. And I remember one of my jobs in England before I moved to Hong Kong was I was the editor of a film magazine called Impact. And we would see the big American movies of the day, like the very early Batman, the Tim Burton Batman movies, or the Warner Brothers action films like Tango and Cash, and these kind of films. And you would, every aspect of them would be state-of-the-art, the special effects, the production design, and the scripts would be very good. But the martial arts action was really lagging behind. And I was always evangelizing and saying that Americans studios should hire someone like Sammo Hung or Corey Yun or Yun Wo-ping to go to do the action on these movies, and the other aspects they could handle themselves, but they're not as good at doing martial arts combat. And of course the choreographers, some of the American choreographers, when they heard about this, were up in arms, and they would say, well, American audiences will never sit still for all of that flying on wires and leaping around, which is what they perceived the Hong Kong style to be. What I think was different and is different about the Hong Kong approach is it's a holistic approach, in that there's a tendency in America, or there was in the past more, to, when you had a martial arts fight, you would basically shoot a wide shot and grab what you could of two people swinging at each other. There was a sense that you just had to put it together in the editing room, having shot from very basic angles. Or a more recent and even more unpleasant phenomenon for me is the idea that you have two people fighting, and so to make the audience feel like they're involved, you shake the camera, like the poor cameraman has Parkinson's or something, and that style. And when you look at the Hong Kong way of filmmaking, you look at the way that a Donnie Yen or a Sammo Hung would look at a fight sequence, an action sequence, they would be looking at it with a very specific sense of space and time. What angle to shoot from, what lens to use on the camera, what camera speed to shoot at, where to cut. And they would be editing the fight in their head, and the camera would be a participant in the action. And sometimes that would mean quick cuts to different angles to cover what you need, and sometimes it would just be locking the camera and having the people move within the frame. Whereas with American fights, you would just shoot from two angles and cut it together in the editing room and hope that it looked okay. With Hong Kong filmmakers, they would use many more angles, and the analogy I would sometimes use is that their fights were, the reason that the fights in even classic Hong Kong movies shot in the 70s, the fights look so great today, is they were shot in a form of 3D. There was a 3D approach to them. Not that they were using technical 3D, but there's like a three-dimensional angle to the way that the fights are shot and covered. Whereas with the American equivalent, it felt more like 2D, that they would just set the camera in a certain place and you got what you could. With Hong Kong filmmakers, they were so brilliant at shooting with the right film speed, with the right edit points, that if you go back to classic movies of Sammo Hung and Donnie Yen and Yuen Woo-ping, they stand up today because of the craftsmanship involved in the way that they would approach covering that kind of action. And it was a very different mindset. Now, of course, many Hong Kong filmmakers have worked in America, and many American filmmakers have studied and borrowed from Hong Kong filmmakers. And now I would say that on the better American movies, not all, but on some of the better American martial arts action films, there's in certain kinds of action, they're pretty close, particularly contemporary action.
Would you say that The Matrix was kind of a turning point for American films?
Oh, absolutely. It's interesting. I was working at a company called Media Asia at the time, The Matrix, just before The Matrix came out theatrically. And my then wife was working at Warner Brothers, and both offices were on Canton Road in Hong Kong. And she gave me a very early video. It was a VHS, that's how far back it was, of the very first trailer. And I just looked at that and said, this is going to be the paradigm-shifting film. This is the turning point. And we knew Yuen Woo-ping had done the action for the movie, but nobody knew quite the degree to which he was going to be allowed to realize his vision. And I remember showing it to my bosses, showing it to my senior colleagues at Media Asia, and they were like, they thought it was a cool-looking trailer, but is it really such a game changer? I said, yeah, it will be, because Americans have never seen this style before. I mean, there were two. There was like The Matrix, which was the film that really delivered a new kind of contemporary martial arts action. And then, of course, you had Crouching Tiger. I was present for the world premiere of that film in Cannes. And again, there was this stunned reaction from the non-Chinese audiences. Of course, if you were a Chinese audience, you would have seen a lot of that stuff before, maybe not with the scale of Matrix and perhaps not with the style of Crouching Tiger as a film, but you would have seen that style of action, so you maybe wouldn't be so excited. But if you were... The defining films were, there was a movie that Warner Brothers did called Soldier with Kurt Russell and Jason Scott Lee a few months before Matrix. And, I mean, Soldier really looked so slow and so clumsy compared to Matrix that was the old guard leaving and the new guard arriving within a few months. And it was at Warner Brothers, who had done Enter the Dragon years earlier. So I have to give credit to Warner Brothers. They tend to be ahead of the curve in terms of martial arts action. But that was you're absolutely right. The Matrix was the real paradigm-shifting film. And after that, not all of them delivered on it, but all American movies had the potential and the promise of delivering something close to Hong Kong-style action.
And are you familiar with 8711 and Chad Stahelski?
Very much so. Yes. To my disappointment, I'm sorry to say I've never met any of the people involved, though we have many similar friends. David Leitch, who's one of the guys there, I seem to remember we've had some exchanges previously, maybe by email or something, but I greatly admire their work and have always thought that what they did with movies action, even before John Wick, what they did on movies where they were responsible for the action was really extraordinary. There's two things I would mention about that. One is that what's interesting is a lot of the times when you have a movie that is a Hollywood studio film, even though the choreographers have done their job, the director and the studio and the special effects and the editors, everybody gets involved with the process. And sometimes when you look at the DVD, the behind the scenes video of the choreography looks amazing, but what's in the finished film is not as good. I mean, a case in point would be a movie like Ninja Assassin with Rain, where they spent all that time training this guy to be an amazing martial artist, and to me, you don't really see that in the finished film because of the way it was shot. But that wasn't the fault of 9711. That was down to people making the movie. So it just didn't, to me anyway, I was disappointed because if you're going to call your film Ninja Assassin, I expect to see a ninja assassinating people, and I want to see some slam-bang martial arts action. But with John Wick, they were directing the film themselves, the partners in that company, so they could call all the shots. And I think that's why everybody thought John Wick was amazing, because the best thing you can do if you have choreographers who know what they're doing is get out of their way and let them do it, which is the foundation of the Hong Kong filmmaking approach. The other thing I would mention is that people say to me, oh, well, now the Americans are doing martial arts combat on screen as well as they do it in Hong Kong, as well as they do it in China. I would say for certain kinds of contemporary fist and foot fighting and gunplay, that's absolutely the case. I still think that we do kung fu fighting, whether it's Yip Man style, grounded, Southern fist, or the Crouching Tiger, flying in wires style. I still think we do that better in Hong Kong. We do it better in China than anybody does in America. But for the contemporary action, they've absolutely caught up.
I think that Chad Stahelski does a really nice job of getting a lot of the elements from Hong Kong action right, because Hong Kong action, a lot of the things that to me symbolize it is like fighting in confined spaces, using anything as a prop, letting you see the whole action in a wide shot. And he seems to be doing that kind of thing well.
I agree. You cannot dismiss these guys and say, oh, they're just ripping off Hong Kong filmmakers. They have their own vision, their own style. And the John Wick films look different to the equivalent Hong Kong movie. They're different films than would be made in Hong Kong, because those guys bring their American sensibility to the project just as an American filmmaker would, just as a Korean filmmaker would, because there are definitely some really underrated contemporary action films in Korea as well these days. But they brought their own aesthetic and their own look to the films. But what they've done that's really important, and it sounds so obvious, is you really want to see the technique. You want to see what somebody's doing in the frame, and hopefully you want to see them doing it, or at least if you're going to double somebody, that they're doubled in a way that the audience is going along with the ride, that they're not going, oh my God, look, that's a stunt double or it's a special effect. So if you have people like, I believe Keanu Reeves now is trained to an extraordinary level, for an actor, I mean, that you can see his movements in the film and you just go, you see a wide shot, or the camera follows him doing a long sequence of motions, and the audience is stunned to see clearly everything that's going on. And you have another style, which maybe the Bourne Identity style, where they choreograph it, and then when they get on the set, they just shake the camera up and down, and you almost think maybe they needn't have bothered. And there's another disturbing phenomenon which I witnessed. I saw on Triple X, saw it before on Fast and Furious. When they do action scenes, they want to use high shutter speed, so you get this kind of shimmer effect, and you don't need it. I mean, none of the great martial art movies in Hong Kong have had that effect. Recently, I've seen it creeping in here as well. And I don't see why you need to enhance what's already extraordinary, which is the physicality. What you should be selling is the physicality of the people in the frame, whether it's the actors or their doubles. But that's what you're selling to the audience if you're doing martial arts on screen. If you're showing a spaceship, if you're showing a beautiful location, if you're doing a drama scene, then you've got different requirements. But if you're actually having a martial arts fight sequence, whether it's one person against one or one versus a bunch, you should be following clearly the action. And it's interesting because you look at a movie like Triple X, which my man Donnie Yen stole the movie anyway, but I don't think the way that the action scenes are conveyed appropriate because of the shutter speed, this kind of flicker effect that they have. But they look at a movie like The Accountant with Ben Affleck, who's a great actor, but he's not 1/100th the martial artist that Donnie is. And the end fight is fantastic, and the action in that movie looks really good because you can see what's happening. And I want to see the guys fight. That's why it'd be like going to an MMA fight and they put a strobe effect on all the way through an MMA match. And you'd be going, why are you dazzling me with the lighting effect? I want to see two guys go at it in the cage. Well, that's what you're seeing if you watch a martial arts fight scene in a movie. To my mind, the responsibility of the filmmaker is to show the two people in combat in the most clear and dynamic way possible. And that's always been the hallmark of great Hong Kong action filmmakers. And now more and more people in Hollywood are signing up for that same aesthetic.
Well, and the other thing is the overcutting as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's just, sometimes, look, the fact is, sometimes the shaky camera, the blurry effects, the lighting being dark, the cutting, it's to compensate for the fact that maybe the actor can't do much, there's a lot of doubling going on, or that the action itself doesn't look particularly good and you need to somehow ramp it up in the editing room. So there's reasons why you make choices that you make, and I'm really aware of that. It's less acceptable if you have someone like Tony Jaa in Fast and Furious, who we know can move really well, and he's subject to kind of bad lighting, bad edits, and shimmer effects, because you don't need that, because you can cut him loose and he can do a lot of stuff. I'm a little hesitant because, I don't know, it's like if you're a maker of films, I think there's this disturbing trend that everybody has a second career as a critic of films. But I suppose, having worked in the business as long as I have, I can at least tell you my taste when it comes to the aesthetics of action filmmaking, because I've been involved in the industry so long, both as an active participant and as a devotee of the genre.
Well, it also seems like in Hong Kong and other places in Asia that they value it as part of the filmmaking process because they actually have awards for action choreographers, which is something they don't have here.
Well, it's amazing to me that on the major action movies, martial arts action movies that get made, that the action directors, the stunt coordinators, don't get a front card credit on Hollywood films. I think Yuen Woo-ping did on The Matrix, which, if he hadn't, it would have been outrageous. But with some of these films, you're thinking, apart from the stunt and martial art action sequences, why would you be bothering to watch this film? And yet, the stunt and action coordinator gets relegated to the back credits, and, you get 19 producers at the beginning. And by the way, I'm sometimes one of those 19, so I'm not saying take away the producer credits. But if you're going to credit 30 producers at the beginning of a new image movie, which doesn't require, but barely is produced by one person, surely you put the choreographer in, you should have the choreographer's name up front as well. So, whereas in Hong Kong, you're absolutely right. In the old days, action directors swap roles very casually, which doesn't happen so much in Hollywood. But it was very common for directors to action direct direct a movie, action direct another movie, or even direct and action direct at the same time on two films during the golden days of Hong Kong filmmaking. But we knew that was our stock in trade. That was something we did better than anybody else in the world. So that became the focus. The other big thing was happening in Hong Kong at that time is they were not shooting live sound. So you would shoot the dialogue in a day, and then you'd have a month to shoot the action, which is great. Whereas in America, it tends to be the reverse. You get a month of even on these big action films, when one might argue the scripts are hardly Chekhov or Shakespeare, you get a week of drama, and then you get told to do a day. You have to cover a fight in a day, and that's another difference in the approach. So, for Hong Kong people, we always thought they were movies. Hollywood for a long time was into talkies, and we were into movies. We would move, the camera would move, and the films would move at a good clip. And the idea was that what people were buying when they went to see a Hong Kong movie was action.
And so do you see that what Chad Stahelski is doing as a positive move for action films in America?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's fascinating, the cross-pollination, because I bet you're going to see people in China and people in Hong Kong doing a similar kind of movie with Chinese people in Chinese, because there's definitely, one cannot say, oh, this movie is just a frame-by-frame remake of a Hong Kong movie. They've taken something of the Hong Kong aesthetic, but they've also added what is specifically their own, to quote Bruce Lee. So I think that anybody who's working in the field, who works to a high level, will, first of all, the work has integrity unto itself, that advances the whole of the form. And secondly, I think we're living in a world where you have to be, I don't want to use the word globalization, but I mean that there is a sense that art forms now really know no boundaries. And you get people, like, for example, in my own tradition of the Hongaku, there's definitely more focus and more dedication on the part of the non-Chinese students than there is on the Chinese. And most of the people in Germany, the people in Italy and America and England who are practicing the style are far more dedicated overall than the people in Hong Kong these days. So similarly, I think that Hong Kong action filmmaking has been transformed into Chinese action filmmaking or Chinese filmmaking, but it's definitely not at the same level as it was in its heyday. And so the fact that there's opportunities for Hong Kong filmmakers in America, and the fact that American filmmakers are absorbing some of the Hong Kong style is really great, because, I mean, I don't know. Hong Kong filmmakers have worked primarily in China, but I don't know if anybody would argue that the increased budgets and the increased platform means that the movies made in China now are as great as the movies we made in Hong Kong in the Golden Era. I don't think they are. And I think that definitely there's a case to be made. Chinese audiences seem to want to watch American movies more than anything else. So another way to perpetuate what I consider to be my art form may be the kind of the absorption of Hong Kong style action into mainstream Hollywood movies.
Okay, well, I want to thank you very much for making some time for me.
My pleasure. Happy to talk about it.
Well, I really enjoyed talking to you, and hopefully we'll talk again.
Thank you.
All right.
Absolutely. Take care.
You
All
too.
Right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. That was Bay Logan, author of Hong Kong Action. Thanks for listening to another edition of listener-supported KPBS Cinema Junkie podcast. If you haven't seen John Wick 1 and 2, go see them now, and maybe this discussion will allow you to watch those films with a newfound appreciation for all the work and innovation that's gone into them. Plus, they're just ridiculous fun. And it looks like Chapter 2 leaves an opening for Chapter 3, so we have something to look forward to. Although I'm not sure how much more abuse John Wick can take. All this talk about action makes me want to queue up a Jackie Chan or John Woo film before heading out to see John Wick Chapter 2 again. So, till our next film fix, I'm Beth Accomando, your resident cinema junkie.
KPBS On Demand is supported by Splatero, helping homeowners pay off debt by offering streamlined access to your home's equity with no additional monthly payments or new debt. Splatero provides a lump sum payment in exchange for a share of your home's future value. Pre-qualification is available at splatero.com.